Hi, we're here live at SAP TechEd in Las Vegas, and I'm here with Max, who is SAP's Chief Innovation Officer. Welcome to the live show.
Thank you for having me.
How are you doing today?
I'm doing great.
Great, great. So as the Chief Innovation Officer, let's talk a little bit about your strategy.
Well, for SAP, it's pretty critical that we future-proof the investment our customers have made in SAP solutions. In the last 20 years, our customers have spent more than $80 billion on new software and subscription software alone. That's not support, not services. That's the amount that's being invested into SAP software the first time it's implemented. And that means it's critical for our company to think about how that software evolves, not just next year or the year after, but for decades into the future, because this is the foundation of everything that global commerce runs on. And when we think about this from an innovation perspective at SAP, we think we really have two mandates. One of those mandates is to drive technical research and innovation. Figure out what are the game-changing technologies that are coming to market that cause us to re-architect our solutions from the ground up. You see machine learning all over the show floor right now. That's exactly the type of topic that we drove within our technology innovation group over the last 5 years. It's wonderful that it's everywhere now, but it took that kernel of insight early on and that bold bet that SAP made in pushing it forward and understanding its implications for our company. We're doing the same thing right now when it comes to blockchain, homomorphic encryption, when we think about process mining and process automation. And so from that perspective, it's critical that we have our perspective and really move boldly. The second thing that we do is we drive product incubation. And SAP built its name on being a world-class enterprise applications business, which means we need to think about what are the big megatrends. I mean, we drove this with globalization. Right now we see networks driving in full force. It's not just things like Ariba, which is helping us connect suppliers and buyers all over the globe, but the change of the economy around gig workers, around contingent labor, is really changing the fundamental composition of what it is to be an organization. And we need to incubate a generation of products that allow SAP's customers to compete and win in that area. And there is where we make big bets on applications. We have themes in new systems of engagements. We have themes in, as I mentioned, business process automation and delivering outcomes as a service, where we don't even think about pricing software at all, but we deliver end outcomes enriched by embedded software. So think about not paying for recruiting software, but actually getting a recruitment service that is enabled via an AI. Those types of things drive out of our product incubation group, and we're incredibly proud of the work they're doing as well. And when you bring that technology focus and that product focus together, you get change for our customers, exactly the type of change that they hope we deliver, not over a one-year basis, but over a decades-long period.
Very insightful. So we know that you have a strategy talk.
Yes.
And
yes.
we want to talk a little bit about that. So we know that in your strategy talk, you talk a little bit more about the future of enterprise software. So can you talk a little bit more about what you're focused on when it comes to that?
Absolutely. I boil it down really simply. So the first thing that I say is that the future of enterprise software will be personalized, I would say hyper-personalized and context-aware. The reality is, when we look at the applications in our phones, the consumer apps that we pull into our lives on a day-to-day basis, they are responsive to everything about who we are. They understand our location, they understand our desire in that moment, they understand our history.
Yeah.
And that type of context needs to be brought into enterprise apps, because you want your application to make you better. You want it to understand who you are and augment you. You want it to give you superpowers. So we have to think about new identity models, new ways of harnessing the power of the context that we create in our digital trail in order to enable new types of application service. That's one piece of it. The world will be modular, so we are focusing on innovations that will allow not just different technologies to connect to one another, but like I mentioned before, the walls of an organization are becoming permeable. We have to think about how companies interact with other subsidiaries across geographic boundaries, especially in a world where there's a balkanization of the internet. We have to think about how a gig worker and a contingent laborer, as well as a full-time employee, all interact with your enterprise systems. And so we focus on modularity there. And then the last thing we need to do is we need to invest in new business models, because the 20th century was a century that was built on the back of distribution scale. The hardest problem we had through the 20th century was figuring out how to get a product from point A to point B. And we solved that challenge, as did our customers. It's not the challenge of the 21st century. And a lot of not just ours, but a lot of the great companies of the world have their business model founded on the challenge that they solved in order to globalize, and we need to help them evolve. And so tomorrow's talk will go very, very deep into what we think are the great technologies and the great new products that will enable our customers to tackle all of those challenges.
And last question for you. I know that within your talk, you're going to talk a little bit more about how we run, how we build, and how we partner. Can you dive a little bit deeper into that?
Yeah. As I mentioned, we have to have a perspective on the future. And the perspective focuses on hyper-personalization, modularity, and new business models. How we run is really how we organize our teams and empower innovators across SAP in order to make progress there. We want to share that with our customers as well as our partners here at TechEd, because we think it's important that people have an understanding of the outcomes we're trying to achieve and confidence that we're going in the right direction. How we build is about how our individual teams make progress. It's also important to recognize that innovation doesn't happen overnight. Every flash in the pan success that you've seen, the overnight success of Gmail, for instance, tens of millions of users within the first year it was released, was something that was built on the back of 4 years of internal adoption inside of Google. There was a great deal of innovation for a small team operating with patience. And we're going to talk about how SAP is making that real. Because you don't always see it on a day-to-day basis if you're outside, but there are hundreds of employees inside of SAP who are working on projects at that small scale that will have immense impact over the long run. And the last thing that I'd say is there's no way SAP can drive this impact by ourselves. The world is full of great minds, and there are far more great minds outside of SAP than inside of SAP. That's just a numbers game.
Yeah.
And we have to think about new ways of partnering, of bringing those wonderful ideas back into our ecosystem. And so we'll talk a lot about what we're doing with prized competitions tomorrow in order to get great academics collaborating with us all around the globe, as well as what we're doing to partner with new SaaS startups, as well as large-scale hyperscalers, et cetera, in order to bring new capabilities into SAP's portfolio and into the hands of our partners and customers.
Well, thank you, Max. Thank you for joining our show and being here today. And
Absolutely.
Thank you all for watching.
Thanks for having me.